Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is January 18th, 2019. Strong hand, offended by selling. Unconfiscatable, holder of last resort. Value your wealth in Bitcoin. All right, we've got an exciting panel here. We got Jeet. He's coming in from an undisclosed location somewhere in the center of the United States, I guess. I don't know where. Farzam Eshani is coming in from South Africa, of course. And soon, if all goes well, Gabriel from Venezuela will be coming in from Venezuela. You know, there's always drama in Venezuela, and it's always great to have someone that's actually in Venezuela tell us what's going on. More drama than usual there. Okay, well, let's since Farzam's in South Africa, let's start out with. I don't usually like to talk about the articles that CoinDesk puts out there, but there's actually two interesting ones that pertain to Farzam. Actually, there's in South they have an article I linked to it below. It's about South Africa, about the government wanting the exchanges and the wallets to be registered. And coincidentally enough, Farzam it has an exchange, and he'll mention that, and he's been working with the government. So what is up with that?
Sure. So basically, a couple of days ago, the South African authorities made an announcement, put out a consultation paper for the public to consider and to give feedback to the South African Reserve Bank, amongst some of the other regulators, by mid-February. And effectively, over the last couple of years, the South African Reserve Bank specifically has been thinking about what their approach to cryptocurrencies should be, crypto assets in general should be. So they've actually taken a very proactive approach with the industry, inviting about 100 participants from the industry to have workshops with them, to hear what the industry thinks, what type of regulation they think is appropriate, etc. And actually, it's been a very, very inclusive process. So I know a lot of people in the Bitcoin world, this is the antithesis to what Bitcoin is all about, which is regulation, etc. But there are there we
How
go.
are you?
Everyone's in the house.
Gabriel, we're live, so shh.
Okay.
Farzam.
Sorry.
Welcome, Gabriel. So if and I'll speak personally about what I'm doing and what my thoughts are, as well as Valor.com, the exchange that just launched. And effectively, when you think about what we're trying to do, is Bitcoin has become a kind of a main topic in the mainstream media, etc., over the last couple of years, as we know. But there's still many people that want it to be at the fringe, outside of government control. Government has nothing to do with it, totally decentralized ecosystem. And our view is that actually, if things are going to go mainstream, we need to work with government, we need to work with the regulators, so that we can actually bring this new asset class to the market. So there's a lot of stuff that is being done in the name of cryptocurrencies and in the name of Bitcoin, etc., that are pure scams. And so in South Africa, at least, there is an endeavor to try to kind of bring the people that are participating in the industry as a first step just to register with the South African Reserve Bank. So, and in doing so, there will be a few requirements, like we'll need to KYC, which Valor does at the moment. And our view is that we are indeed a centralized platform, or a centralized exchange in a decentralized world, trying to bring this beautiful new asset class to the masses. So it's exciting news, I think, and I think the South African Reserve Bank has specifically said that they're going to be taking an incremental approach, just to try to understand what's going on in the industry, first of all, before taking any drastic measures. So there's no banning, they've said, but there's also no on the other side, absolutely no intervention whatsoever. But this is a step, I feel, in the right direction to legitimize the asset class in the eyes of the public in South Africa.
All right. So, Jeet, you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah. So look, that's really reasonable. I don't think there's anything I'd I think that the main thing to just point out is a lot of times you hear people in central banks are like mainstream financial reporters talking about the importance of things like KYC to prevent money laundering, and to prevent criminals from using cryptocurrency, and that how cryptocurrency is actually a tool for criminals. And I think it's important to point out that, just to level set, like that's actually not the case. The vast majority of people using cryptocurrencies are just mainstream investors. So like there's grandmas who are going on Coinbase, buying thousands of dollars of Bitcoin or any other currency. The challenge that Bitcoin faces is that it kind of like once people learn more about Bitcoin, it exposes some of the inconsistencies in the current system. So I think what you'll find is that the reason that most people I think are a little bit hesitant about endorsing centralized, just normal companies acting as trusted third parties that report to the central bank or that have KYC is that so from one perspective, you're getting more distribution. You're going to reach a lot of the South African population. You're going to be legitimized. In New York right now, Gemini is taking a similar approach. So they've got like on every taxi cab, they've got like a Gemini. We're regulated crypto, right? To try to get people more comfortable with it. And I think it's one approach. But the challenge is if people start not learning about the other piece. So like right now, the banking system isn't very inclusive. And part of the reason it's not inclusive is because of all these regulations that the banks have to put up with from like central governments. And so what happens is as you raise the cost as you increase the number of regulations, the cost per customer goes up. So all these marginal customers that would be serviced by, like your local bank, but maybe it's a small local bank, all of a sudden they become unprofitable. So that's the real impact that KYC has. And in addition, if you look at that, there's like entire state level, states, like governments, like Italy famously in all the EU reports and, has publicly been documented that a significant portion of their budget is captured by like criminal elements. And so that's like an entire government in the EU that's captured, but there's no issue with that. But if, like somebody who's on like a Native American reserve in America wants to use a bank, all of a sudden there's like 100 issues that pop up. So I think it's important to emphasize that Bitcoin is for everybody. And that's why like these KYC type of systems and engaging with them, it feels like it's a little bit like you're kind of, I don't know, it feels like you're giving up a little bit of that cypherpunk spirit. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Like, I don't know how inclusive the banks are in South Africa, or if they're reaching some of those populations that might be excluded.
No, I think in South Africa, actually, it's an oligopolistic market structure for the banks. So there are very few banks. The fees are very, very high. You actually have to pay a monthly fee to the bank for the privilege of them using your money to make more money, right? So I think in many ways, the South African banking system is a little bit backward compared to the rest of the world. I studied in the US. To pay for your bank account when I was a college student was unthinkable, right? So there's a lot to be done in changing that. On all of your points, I absolutely agree. So, the peer-to-peer nature of cryptocurrencies is there, and there is no doubting that, and there's a lot of power in that. And I think there's actually no stopping that either, right? So, but I think we get stuck in this dichotomous dialogue where we say the world has to be either this way or that way. It needs to be purely decentralized, or everybody has to have their own private keys, or and governments and banks are corrupt and they're bad, etc. Right? So I think there's a lot of things that have been done badly by banks, a lot of things that have been done badly by governments, but not everybody in banks and not everybody in government is evil, right? And the same thing with Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin, there are a lot of dodgy characters in our industry, and it's not an industry that sometimes I'm the most proud to be a part of, because some of our dialogues are extremely toxic, not very constructive, etc. So what we're trying to do is we're saying, listen, we are pro everyone having a choice of how they want to engage with this new decentralized asset class. And the fact of the matter is that there is a hell of a lot of education that is required to actually understand what cryptocurrencies are to be able to engage with the ecosystem, understanding what a private key is, that you cannot reset your private key if you lose it. And the fact of the matter is there are many, many people that do not want that responsibility. So what we're saying is, for those that want to be off the grid, by all means go ahead, and more power to you. But for those that actually want to have an on-ramp into crypto, they feel like they don't really care if they get KYC'd. We want to provide that service to them. And we think that's actually a huge, huge market, which is these on and off ramps into and out of crypto. And at the end of the day, we're trying to build, like, one of the mottos of Valor is we're trying to help build a financial system that recognizes the oneness of humankind and humanity. And so we believe the best way to do that is to take the world with us. And it's going to be a long process, but step at a time, helping to educate the regulators understand things as well, will push us hopefully in the right direction. There are a lot of challenges, there's no doubt. We're just one of the system that's trying to bring this asset class to a good place.
Hey, wait a second. Oh, okay. One thing, Farzan, I've got a question. We had a little technical issue there. Is it, in terms of the government wanting everyone, well, the exchanges and the wallets to be registered, and that's giving them a lot of information. Are they going to actually be able to pull this off? I know there's a lot of bureaucracy in South Africa. I mean, there's a lot of, is it just talk, or are they going to be able to do this efficiently?
So I think there's some talk in South Africa, people saying that all wallet providers need to register all their Bitcoin addresses, etc. Now, I think that's unreasonable, and I don't think that's even possible. You can create a wallet. I mean, it's like saying everybody needs to register their email address with the government. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, we're over that. We realize that that's not really a possibility, that you're not going to register your email address. So I think right now it's in the early stages. The reason that we welcome this current proposal is that we feel it's not too stringent, and it's just allowing the regulators to just kind of come on board a little bit and provide some legitimacy to the industry itself. Now, I will also be the first, and I've spoken very candidly with the regulators, that if they are too, if they want to be too controlling, then this will go underground, and there is no way. Like, the way I like to talk about Bitcoin is a language, right? It's a protocol, it's a language. So if you wanted to shut down the English language, where do you even start? It's pretty much impossible. So in this case, what we're saying, and what we're trying to advise the regulators as well, is to say, if you want insight, there is no problem, especially when it comes to the on and off ramps between fiat currency and cryptocurrency. Fiat currency is the way it is right now, KYC is there, etc. And if you want to provide that service as an on and off ramp, then by definition, you need to be plugged into that fiat system. So what we're saying is, get those on and off ramps. If you want to have some insight there, that's fine. But once people are into crypto, I mean, they're free to do whatever they want, and it's pretty much impossible to stop them.
All right. G, did you have any, I mean, he did respond to you. Do you have any response to what he had to say?
No, I think he's making fair points. In general, I think one of the things that is kind of annoying sometimes in the United States is that there's like one or two big exchanges, and they try to purposely increase the number of regulations. It's kind of like, it's a really common tactic that you see in every single industry, where like you're kind of raising the water level so that only the most well-funded people will be able to compete. I think that's, I mean, in your situation in South Africa, it seems like a little different scenario, where you're just trying to at least like get everybody in the pool, maybe to continue that analogy. But yeah, I think that's fair. I think you made a good point that Bitcoin is a protocol, and once you're in the system, you're in the system. It's kind of like the internet. I don't think anybody anticipated that the internet would level the playing field so much and just kind of destroy all these different borders. And it used to be that there was like one, central node of like, this is the central government's broadcast station, and if you control the central broadcasting station, you can launch a coup, you can do whatever you want, because that's what controls everybody's media attention. And it's gone from that one-to-many broadcast system to many-to-many. So now people are following their local friends on Twitter and everywhere else. They're getting their information from so many different sources. And I just think that Bitcoin is just a continuation of that. So that's a brilliant point that, as long as we can get it to as many people as possible, it's like they're kind of empowered at that point. And once they've got their, they can transition from your wallet to their private keys and put it in their own, private wallet. Yeah, they'll be in a good position. So it's a very good point. I kind of agree.
Adam, can I add one more thing to this? Just one more point on this thing, which is, if we look at the history of humanity and kind of where we've come from and where we're going, right now, I think a lot of the sentiment in a lot of the crypto community about kind of against banks and governments, etc., is that these are trusted institutions that have effectively betrayed the trust of the public, right? So when you have your trust kind of broken, then you're very skeptical and you actually want to kind of shun the entity or the institutions that are meant to be a trustworthy institution that weren't. And so there's this kind of sentiment that now we need to leave all centralized entities and go back towards a completely decentralized world. And the way I view that is that we've come from that. We've evolved from that. Hunters and gatherers, there were no laws. Everybody was a law unto themselves. We had distributed money. Everybody had their own gold coins. It was distributed. They were bearer instruments. But once they were, and it was decentralized. But once they had these gold coins, some of them felt, let's go and actually give them to a central intermediary that we can trust because we actually don't want someone to come and knock us over the head and take our gold coins, etc. Right? So we came from a completely kind of decentralized society. We realized actually there's a lot of benefit to collaborating and kind of getting governance structures right. And so we moved and evolved in that direction. Unfortunately, some of our systems are really quite broken right now. And so rather than thinking about how to fix them, a lot of people are thinking about how to just move back to a completely decentralized world. And I certainly am not one for that. I think we're a social species where we need to interact with one another. We need to trust one another. Trust has been betrayed. Governments, companies, etc. There is something tremendously wrong with our system. But I don't think that the answer is now don't trust anybody, hold your own money, and basically take care of your family, and that's it. That's a very bizarre kind of line of thinking to me.
Very, very interesting. Well, yeah, that would you'd be living like in a cave at that point, hiding from the world. Just take care of your little family. Yeah. I mean, I will say this: we do have failures of government, and that's a good transition to Gabriel. Gabriel, what is going? Well, Gabriel, you might have some thoughts on what's just been said these last 20 minutes. First of all, but what's going on in Venezuela? Ooh, you're muted, I believe. Oh God, we got it. Gabriel. Oh, it's
coming back on.
We'll get him back. I mean, everyone wants to know what's going on in Venezuela. In the meantime, everyone, I haven't said it yet this show, but pound that like button for what we've gotten so far, baby. All these guys are linked to below. Definitely check them out. Gabriel will be back on shortly, hopefully. Well, Farzan, you're almost transitioning into the article that you wrote. It is some of the topics I wanted to cover. This article that Farzan wrote for CoinDesk that started off 2019 in an interesting way, an interesting reminder, actually. Blockchain technology is powerful. This is a quote from it, but its domain is the digital world, not the physical one. And I agree with that. We can't put everything on the blockchain. You put your house on the blockchain, you lose your private key. What happens? You lose your house? So yeah, discuss that article a little bit, Farzan.
Yeah, I think, having been the blockchain lead at the largest bank in Africa for about 2.5 years, there was a tremendous amount of... Oh, Gabriel's back. Do you want to go back to Gabriel?
Yeah, he's I think his sound is a little messed up. Gabriel, you hear us? We'll get back to him in a minute. You keep talking.
Yeah, I feel like blockchain has been such a term over the last few years that means so much that it's kind of come to mean so little because people just kind of hype it up to say it's this panacea for everything. And especially in the physical world, a lot of people have said blockchain technology is great. We get rid of trusted intermediaries, etc. But the main part of that article is I was saying that blockchains deal with digital assets. You have a digital token on a blockchain that can either be natively issued and therefore in and of itself, it is the asset. So there's nothing to reconcile it against. But as soon as you enter the physical world and try to put physical assets onto the blockchain, be it bananas, gold, oil, property, etc., then you're in this bizarre world where you're actually living in the real world. And even if the asset gets transferred from one party to another on the blockchain, but for whatever reason, there's been an illegitimate or an illegal kind of takeover of that property by someone, you can't appeal to your private key to say, no, I own it, and therefore you must go. Sure, you can say you own it, but that doesn't resolve the conflict. And if that conflict requires some type of resolution where a trusted intermediary like a government and executive force needs to come in and actually uphold what the blockchain says, then surely we should be able to probably trust them to run a database, maybe even a distributed database, maybe even a cryptographically secure database, distributed database, but it doesn't need to be a blockchain. So I just feel like I personally have come to the conclusion that blockchain technology is absolutely amazing for digital assets, particularly decentralized digital assets and cryptocurrencies. But when we try to kind of extend the use of blockchain for things that just don't lend themselves to it is where we start seeing what we're seeing. We don't really have any real use cases in production in a meaningful way around the world for assets that are physical.
Yeah, I hope people wake up to that in 2019. That this is for this is for digital assets. This is not exactly for the physical world. Jeet, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, here are my thoughts. So I think that what people have been trying to do. So like, what are the mechanisms that we have for dispute resolution in like the physical world? We have like a legal system that's evolved over thousands of years. We have contract law that's evolved for even more thousands of years. And when things have been broken, they've been fixed. You have thousands of years of little incremental improvements and evolution to get to a point where you have something that actually kind of works pretty damn well. Like if you run a company now, you hire some lawyers, it's costly, but like things work out. You're not going to like lose your shirt. And I think in
certain jurisdictions, and yeah, not everywhere in the world, but absolutely, like
right. So in certain jurisdictions, that's right. So and then the problem is that this is the trusted third party problem, right? Where I think in America you can trust the third party to probably act correctly in the vast majority of cases. In other countries, somebody can go it's much easier to bribe the one judge than it is to bribe every single person in the country. So when you establish a trusted third party, it's one judge who's making decisions. It's very easy for like nefarious elements to go and corrupt the system that way. And so if you don't have a strong culture and there's like 100 different things that can go wrong, then it becomes like, what? Well, how do we get around this problem? If you can't have trusted third parties, how do you figure out the solution? So I'm really interested. I've seen some pitches for companies that are trying to do like loans on the blockchain and different stuff. I think it's really interesting when you start doing incremental evolution and you start small, you see what works, and then you start going from there. But if somebody tries to go out and tries to, recreate the whole ecosystem of all these the whole ecosystem, and they've got all this game theory that they've thought up in their head and they just kind of blurt it out onto a page and now here's a protocol, that's probably not going to end up working because it's like, you just can't evolve a complex system from scratch. You got to start from the simplest possible thing. So I think if people start, focusing more on those simple things that might work, smart contracts can be very interesting. They should be focused on like one or two variables at most in the beginning though. So, but I totally agree with your assessment of like the way that blockchain has been overused and it's been used to overhype some things and maybe, sell securities more than, evolve the legal process.
All right. 2019, Bitcoin, not blockchain. Spread the word, people. Spread the word.
Oh.
All right. So now let's talk about 2019. What's going on in Venezuela, Gabriel?
Yes, I'm about to go through a tunnel. So maybe you will lose me for a second and I'll be right back. But yes, man, we have big expectations for this month. Political turmoil has been boiling these days. And
this is the thing. You have a new president. Oh, here you see now you're going through the tunnel. Hang on.
Trying to establish a new.
Hang on, Gabriel. You're in a tunnel. We'll wait on you. We'll wait you out there.
What a cliffhanger. He ended up establishing a new government. So.
This is what you get here. All right.
Yes,
Gabriel,
I'm back.
Are you?
Can you hear me?
Okay, you're through the tunnel.
Yep.
Okay. Yes. Yes, we can. Here's my question.
Please, ask me. Yes. Go ahead.
What's up with this? You guys have a new leader. You have a new leader.
Yes.
Are there going to be? I heard. Okay, tell us about this.
I don't know where they got this guy from, but I think people is very pleased. This is like a surprise guy, you know? Like he came out of nowhere. He was famous at all just 2 weeks ago. And, well, he seems to be now in charge of the, how do you call it in English, the Congress.
Right. The Congress. Hang on. Now you've faded out on us again. Okay, everyone. So there's a new leader in now
an emptiness of power. So he's appointed allegedly as the new president. I'm back.
Yeah. Yeah. You're fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will say again. So 2 weeks ago, he came out of nowhere. Like he got elected as the Congress headman, like the chief of the Congress, right? And then these guys, they claim that Maduro's term was due, and these last elections that they had were not valid. So they're trying to put him in power now.
And right. Just to
add, the big thing, it might be on the 23rd of January, like 3-4 days from now, and allegedly people are gonna come out to the streets and march. I don't know how are they gonna accomplish taking over the power, but that's their intentions, and I can say that there's many people.
Oh God, Gabriel, yeah, you were just to give us the big line there, and it faded out.
Because of little, right? They will try to stay in power. So that's the thing. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you anticipate a conflict between
So the guys in power, they're gonna try to remain in power, and we think it's gonna be a clash of powers. It's gonna be a clash on the streets. There's probably gonna be riots. We're expecting like shortage of electricity and fuel and food for this next week, and we don't really know how long this battle will last. We do know that the governments outside of Venezuela are they're helping or like supporting this new president, and they say that they don't recognize the President Maduro, and so there's a big shift of powers right now, and there's big expectations. And hyperinflation has been ramping these last 3 weeks, has been madness. The exchange rate came to 3,000 bolivars, the new bolivars. So it's a very bad situation for the Venezuelan people right now. Food is become very expensive, very, very expensive, unattainable for normal guys. So even all of us Bitcoiners in Venezuela, even us, we are having a bad time also, because just the money doesn't go anywhere. You know, everything is so expensive, especially food. People in Venezuela right now, I can say that for myself. I only spend money in food. I spend all my money in food. I don't spend money.
All right, Gabriel. Whoa, dude, this is pretty intense stuff you're talking here. And I really appreciate you giving us this on the. on the ground look at this very serious situation that's, I mean, it's about to explode, I guess. This is quite shocking. Jeet, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to ask him for some more details. This is it's really interesting stuff. It sounds like, I guess, the inflation's got even worse to the point where people are struggling to feed their families, although we know that that's been a problem for people on the margin for a long time. It's interesting that, you know, this guy was able to come out of nowhere, and I'd be interested to kind of understand how he got elected to be the head of the Congress. So if there's like...
Yeah, it's your connection is it's failing you, your connection. Oh man, dude, this is some serious stuff, man. This is why you need Bitcoin, people. Seriously, this can happen. Farzam, while we're waiting for the technical difficulties to solve themselves, do you have any thoughts on this situation? I saw you were reacting a little bit over there.
Well, I think it's sad what's happening in Venezuela, and I think you know, in Zimbabwe, here just next door to South Africa, we had something similar that happened with the currency, and then also recently, I don't know if the news gets to you guys in the U.S. about the price of gas or petrol, as you call it over here, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about $12 a gallon that it went up to in Zimbabwe. As you can imagine, Zimbabwe is not the richest country on earth, and so there are lots of riots and a lot of just turmoil, and also the government actually stepping in to disrupt communication channels. WhatsApp was interrupted, the internet was interrupted for large periods of time. So it's again, it just calls into question this, you know, our entire system globally about, you know, the people that are supposedly in power to serve the people. I think it's becoming a relatively common story that that's not really the case. And to find leaders that are actually serving the people and putting themselves kind of not at the forefront or for their own personal agenda is becoming rarer and rarer. So I think we are in very interesting times as society, kind of where we're living. I think more and more we're realizing that, you know, there used to be a time where we said this candidate is really horrible. Let's get this candidate out and let's get another candidate that we're happy with, right? But I think more and more people are realizing that our system itself has an issue, our electoral system, whether it's in South Africa or in the US, etc. So yeah, so I think it's a sad situation what's going on in Venezuela. I think we are, sorry, just 1 second. So I think we are, there's lots of interruptions all around the show here.
Well, I'll say this, yeah, the world is changing real fast here, and I appreciate that Gabriel has given us this insight. We're about to see something big down there, it seems like. I don't think the word has spread just yet. But hold on tight to your Bitcoin if you're in Venezuela, because it's always something. If you need to run out of Venezuela real fast, you can always take your Bitcoin easily with you. I wanted to quickly transition back to one thing we were talking about. We were talking about exchanges beforehand, and I should have brought this up. You know, we're talking regulated exchanges, you know, following the government's what they have to say. But this past week, we had Cryptopia went down for the count. It got hacked, supposedly, and this is going to keep on happening. Jeet, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is this is like the most classic story in crypto. Exchange hacked. You know, people lose a couple $1 million, and it's untraceable. So the thing is, I don't know Cryptopia situation in particular. I think I read that headline and looked away and like whatever. But a lot of times, what happens is that it's like the security at these exchanges is not as good as it should be. So I don't know if you guys have used Cryptopia, but at least as of a couple of months ago, they had like they didn't have two-factor authentication. They had the phone authentication. So like that shows that their level, the phone authentication is important because somebody can quickly just call up your phone carrier and SIM hijack you and take your phone, and then all of a sudden they're in your account. So it just shows that their level of security, it's just like a heuristic that their level of security is probably where it shouldn't have been. There was an exchange that was hacked in Japan recently, and I was listening to the Quant Layer podcast. Those guys were breaking down how, like, if you look at they had all these things where they weren't properly recording transactions. So inside of their exchange, they were not recording who's sending money to whoever else. Just a poor security practice. Somebody can quickly hack into the exchange, or over a period of time hack into the exchange, and just start feeding themselves money. All of a sudden, those guys run an audit, realize they're short, X%. Now they're insolvent. So I think this is like the classic case. This is why it's important to hold your own private keys as a citizen, or as like just a normal, guy, because, like, you don't want to take on the risk. Like, you can't, because people are investing, this is like their security blanket, their Bitcoin or whatever else. You don't want to have your security blanket in the hands of somebody who's probably going to get hacked. And you've had like legitimate exchange, like Mt. Gox was hacked. Okay, fine. But like, Cryptopia was like, they were raising, I think, VC funding at one point. They're plugged in with the regulatory system in Australia. And if they got hacked, you should think seriously about, what your situation is. There's a ton of these other, like, again, really legitimate ones that have been hacked. So it's like, there's just no reason for you not to hold your own private keys and take responsibility for your own kind of wealth.
Yeah, this is, when will people learn is the question. People have very short-term memories. They don't remember these hacks have happened before. And was it really a hack? Was it an inside job? Was it who knows? Who knows? But I think in 2019 we're going to see more of these because people haven't learned their lesson. Farzam, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Jeet said. A lot of what Jeet said. It's a story that's all too common. As a founder of an exchange myself, it's very interesting thought processes that I go through because we still need to prove ourselves as far as being a viable business, and we're certainly doing everything we can to get our platform to be as secure as possible. But the fact of the matter is that every single exchange around the world, every single individual that holds their own private keys, there is no such thing as 100% security. It just doesn't exist. There's always a risk. So I think one of the good things about what's happening in South Africa right now, which we talked a little bit earlier about kind of the regulatory environment, is that hopefully there will be some minimum standards for anybody that is kind of in the game of holding anybody else's private keys. They will need to have a minimum standard of security, of processes, procedures, etc., to safeguard the responsibility of the funds that they're actually holding and custodying on behalf of their customers. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done in education, right? Like, there are a lot of people that might say, you know what, rather than me holding my own private keys, maybe I'm clumsy, or I'm, for whatever reason, I don't have the best record of holding my own private keys. A strategy might be, let me actually diversify my holdings across a bunch of different places. Maybe some of it, in a Ledger Nano or a Trezor, maybe some of it in different places. But the point is, I think people should be educated to understand that there are risks with whatever strategy they employ, and to make sure that they do what is appropriate for themselves. So I think it is silly to hold a lot of your cryptocurrency on any particular exchange, because that's including Valor. Like, I hope that when people come and trade on Valor, that they will put what they need to trade, and we'll obviously put everything we can into security. But I hope that people will also understand that whether you're on Binance or Valor or Coinbase or wherever it is, there are always risks. So understand those risks and make a plan accordingly, and make a deliberate decision about how you choose to hold your wealth.
All right, guys, it's not a bank. These exchanges are not banks, and you can't trust banks anyway. So everybody, pound that like button. Check out the links below, of course. And I do a show here every single day. Check out disruptmeister.com. We're here every Friday with This Week in Bitcoin. I want to talk about a tweet by Stefan Livera that actually Jeet retweeted. Altcoins are not diversification. They're just nonsensical bets that have no realistic chance at winning in the overall market for global sound money. With that in mind, what's going on with Grin?
So I think the context for his tweet was Chris Berdinsky, who wrote this book, who wrote one of the like, first kind of comprehensive books on here are some mental frameworks for you to think about how you should invest in different cryptocurrencies. I think it's called like just crypto assets. So he had a tweet where he just specifically called out people for saying, he said when he talks to people who are making investment allocation decisions, when you tell them you should only buy Bitcoin, it delegitimizes you in front of those investment allocators, although it may make you like more popular on Twitter. So he's kind of calling out basically all of Bitcoin Twitter in his comment. And Steven's pointing out like, look, all of the crypto assets are correlated like 1-to-1 with Bitcoin. So if you're diversifying, it's just like a joke statement to say that, buying, like let's say Monero or something is different than just buying Bitcoin. If you think about it, all of the altcoins, and I don't mean to call them Monero, they're probably one of the more legitimate ones, but like all of the altcoins, they have a chance of just completely going to zero. Most of the altcoins in terms of the numbers and probably a decent amount of the dollars have been straight up scams. So BitMEX did an analysis of how ICOs spend their treasury. I kind of scanned through it, but a lot of it was paying them, the development teams kind of paying themselves. So most of the developments in the blockchain space have been kind of scams. So when people say like everything except for Bitcoin is a scam, it sounds like, oh, wow, well, you're not, really being curious and you're being a little bit hard-headed, but that's the historical fact. And that's probably going to be in the future as well. Sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going. You were saying.
Yeah. So the heuristics that we use to think about like, well, why are things scams? The vast majority of things are scams because they have things like a pre-mine. So the development team will set aside 50% of the coins for themselves. Now, they're going to make some money in selling those coins to the open market to people who don't understand the like who the investors are, and they don't understand the cap table. But it's not going to last. So it may, they may be able to make money for six months, maybe that will last for a year, but it's not going to last over a long enough period of time. If you look at the list of crypto coins in 2013, like none of them exist today except for Bitcoin, Monero, and maybe one or two others, in a real way. And so Grin is interesting because Grin has, it maybe to the general public, Grin has come out as like, wow, this is the next Bitcoin killer. People have been talking about it for like a couple of months, maybe even a couple of years now. So what happened is a couple of years ago, somebody anonymously went to the Bitcoin Wizards IRC communication channel and posted a plain text document of like the Mimble-Wimble protocol. Over the last couple of years, different people have kind of tweaked things, worked on it, and they've got a coin going called Grin coin. And the reason why it's like, and the whole point of Grin and Mimble-Wimble is that it's a new technology. What they're doing is it allows, instead of the Bitcoin UTXO system, it's a lot more scalable and it's a lot more private. And the reason why it's attractive is like, one is the technology piece. It's based on actually legitimate technology that's kind of interesting. So you have a lot of very, very high level top Bitcoin developers who are coming out and saying like, wow, that's interesting technology. And it's also interesting because of that origin story. So like, a big part of the ethos in Bitcoin is the fair launch. You have all these things are tying, like you've got like, I had a list here of like proof of work consensus, anonymous founder, leaderless anonymous developers, no on-chain governance, no pre-mine, and fair launch. So all these, you can imagine all the VCs who are like, well, where's my next Bitcoin killer? It's like, boom, 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 boom. Let's go all in. And you have some figures like, Eric Meltzer, who has the proof of work newsletter, came out and said, wow, there's about $100 million of VC money that's going into mining Grin specifically. So people are really interested. But I think if you dig under the surface, there's like a little bit more. So I don't know, Farzan, if you want to jump in, or I can just start, getting my.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things one of the reasons why the origin story matters is like that cypherpunk ethos. What happens is when you start with the fair launch, Bitcoin has this, Monero has this to some extent. The original people who kind of congeal around the whole story of the coin they're cypherpunks. So that's kind of cool from a couple different perspectives. One is you get people who are like dedicated open source contributors. They want to spend their weekends, their nights, like specifically contributing to the protocol. They want to do the hard work of, getting this thing up and running. They want to work on hard math problems. But it's also like from a time preference perspective, like if you're running a company, who do you want in your cap table? Do you want the guy who's going to be there for 6 months, which is the vast majority of crypto VCs and just general traders? Or do you want some cypherpunk who's like literally does not care about trading and just wants to buy the coin and hold it so that he can make a change you know, in the history of humanity, I guess. Like that's the, so when you have like those types of investors in the beginning, it's a totally different mindset. The people who come and join around Bitcoin, like they join a community that's really focused on really long time horizons, that's focused on buying and holding and focused on value creation. The people who've joined Grin, it's, you know, although the kind of, it checks all the boxes, the reality is because it launched after Bitcoin, there's many, you know, instead of attracting those diehard believers, it's attracted a bunch of mercenaries. So in addition to the $100 million in VC money, which I don't think those guys are going to be there, you know, 10 years down the line if Grin is, you know, suffering. Whereas you can imagine, you know, like Roger Ver, people don't like him. This guy's going to be in Bitcoin, like he's going to be doing something related to Bitcoin for the rest of his life, right? So I just think that time preference matters. And then, yeah, I just like the one of the things that I was also looking at is like, it's just an opportunity for people to make a ton of money really quickly. So like, you know, we're 48 hours from the launch has already happened. We're 48 hours in, people are mining. The exchanges that have been listing Grin have been selling and buying more Grin than that actually has been in existence. So like we're 48 hours in, they're already, you know, hypothecating Grin. And it's particularly dangerous when you think about this is a privacy currency. I don't know if you guys remember the Bitcoin private, you know, kind of combination with Z Classic and Bitcoin. So they found out after a couple months after the fact that as they were, you know, importing those Bitcoin UTXOs into the shielded pool for Bitcoin private, they kind of snuck in $2 million or 2 million coins of extra Z Classic. So like you know, the problem is this is also a privacy currency. So like there's a risk there that there's some, you know, pre-mine or something else happens. It's open source, fair enough. But the fact that it's not as auditable as Bitcoin is, because it's a different type of blockchain, there's also a massive risk there. So I mean, I can go into more detail, but basically I think that you know, oh, and then I think the other main factor too is just the inflation schedule. So people have been pitching it as like kind of an interesting investment. But the reality is, if you look at the way that these, if you look at the inflation schedule, if you buy a Grin now, you're going to be inflated by, the one coin that you have, instead of being 100%, it's going to be worth 1/5 the value in a year from now. So there's so many new coins coming online that it's like holding a share in a company, and automatically in a year, your value is diluted away. So right now, some of the smart money, I think that some of these guys are running, you know, these mines, but I think the smart money is not actually buying Grin right now, and they're waiting for the price to go down. Because if you look at coins like Monero, I mean, you just go down the list, Monero, Zcash, after launch, the price dropped very quickly. So, you know, Grin is interesting because the technology is kind of interesting, but I think it's not a long-term competitor to Bitcoin. You know, partially because it just doesn't have the same kind of investor base, in my view, and also because of some of these, like the technology is not as proven as Bitcoin. That's the other thing, is like, if you think about Bitcoin's technology, like everything that went into Bitcoin was available 8 years beforehand. It's like 11 years since launch, or 10 years maybe since launch. Nothing's changed. We're good to go. This cryptography is good to go. When it comes to cryptography, you want cryptography that has been unbroken. All the cryptography that's in Mimblewimble, like a decent amount of it is unproven. We don't know what kind of attack vectors and things there are. We saw it recently with the Ethereum Constantinople kind of delay. There was like an attack vector there that nobody realized, even with all the money and everything that's going into monitoring that. And then, yeah, ultimately, I think that, you know, people don't fully understand what it is. There's a lot of people shilling it because the level of inflation is so high in these early days. In order for it to be valuable, there needs to be a lot of demand. But the reality is, the way that money's evolved is something needs to be a store of value first, like Bitcoin or gold. And then people get attracted to it, and then they hold it, and then people start trading it later on, rather than like people, because what happens is, if something's useless, I either throw it away or I just don't touch it. I just forget about it. Every single airdrop that I've gotten on Ethereum, I just literally don't know what it is. I don't touch it. I don't care about it. So the risk for these coins is not that, you're trying to compete too much with Bitcoin and you have a really high concentration in wealth. The risk is that nobody cares what your coin is because their value is getting inflated away. So there's no reason for them to even pay attention with it. So I don't know. I kind of went on a rant there, but a couple different angles there.
No, I like that. People are very curious about what's going on. Do you think it can be a long-term competitor? I know you said it can't be a long-term competitor with Bitcoin. How about with Monero? Can it be a long-term competitor with Monero? I mean, that is its competitor.
Yeah, right now. So so from what I can tell now, I think when it comes to so if somebody is using some of these cryptocurrencies trying to do private transactions, the privacy guarantees for Monero and Zcash are probably stronger now if you do Monero or if you do Zcash with the shielded transactions, just because they're proven out, right? Mimblewimbles, we're 48 hours into launch. This thing should really be a test net, but it's gone live. But we just don't know how strong it is. Now, super long term, there's definitely a lot of developer attention and some really smart people who are working on it. So we'll have to see how it works out. But I think Monero's proven that it's going to be here for a very, very long time. Zcash, the zero knowledge proof technology leaves literally no trace at all. So that's like obviously the strongest, and the encryption level, like that's the strongest, that there's no trace at all. So it's going to be hard for Mimblewimble or Grin to compete with that. And I also think that there's areas where Mimblewimble leaks information. So like I'm still trying to like lay out my understanding of the whole protocol, but there's like a buffer zone where if you're listening in, you can kind of pick up transactions. And transactions that I think, transactions that people want to be private, if you can make them unprivate, it's very valuable. So I can imagine some of these like auditing firms, I think Chainalysis, so like Chainalysis, I can imagine, has spent money and is like looking into this and is monitoring right now, listening in, ready to hand over those private transactions if they get the chance.
Well, I like how you said it should be on the test net now, but everything's rushed, and people do not have patience. They want their big payday as soon as possible, I guess. Farzan, a lot was just said. I don't know. Do you have any interest in this topic at all?
No, I think it's very interesting. I have a lot of interest in it. I think the privacy coins specifically are very, very interesting. I think they're going to test the regulations that we talked about earlier to their core, because again, I don't think banning cryptocurrencies that are private will make them go away. And so I liked a lot of what Jeet just said, and I think we need to kind of, it's still so early in the game. There's just been this, the crypto world right now looks so different to a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And things take time to mature. And so I think there's a good dose of humility that we kind of all need to have when we're kind of looking at what the future will be. And I think it will be very, very different to what any of us actually ever imagined. So, yeah, and I think, going back to Bitcoin, as Jeet was saying, there were a lot of kind of competitors to Bitcoin. And we forget that money is not necessarily just a technological or an economic phenomenon, but it's a social phenomenon. It's a network effect. So the more people that accept it, the more people that like it, the more people that hold it, the stronger it becomes. And Bitcoin is really far in the lead right now. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be there, but I think it's great, first of all, that there are lots of new technologies coming on the block, and we'll see where these go. So I think I definitely am one. I call myself a crypto agnostic. I really don't mind whatever cryptocurrency, so to speak, wins or which ones win. I think it's clear that many will die, but I think I'm here because this is just such a beautiful technology that has so much potential. But I think sometimes blindly holding onto a particular protocol or a particular coin because you have your own agenda associated with it. Again, it depends what you're in it for. I'm in it for serving people, serving humanity, hoping to progress humanity. And what that means is I'm open to innovation. Let's see what things bring. And I love the fact that there are new coins coming online all the time, and let's see where they go.
Well, yeah, I got a specific question for you then. At Valor, what coins are listed there?
So we are starting at over 50 coins. So should have mentioned earlier, we have a partnership, an official partnership with Bittrex. So we're going to be listing a lot of their coins on our platform. We chose Bittrex because we feel like Bittrex is actually quite a mature platform, not just from a technology perspective, that they've got very good security, but also with their mindset and what they're trying to do as well. They take a very similar line of action to us, which is we want to bring this new asset class to the public in a responsible fashion. What does responsible mean in today's day and age? Well, abiding by the law without trying to kind of, break laws, etc. So we're really excited about that partnership. We have access to their more than 200 coins that we can list on our platform, and actually more, because you probably heard they also launched Bittrex Malta recently. So a lot of the tokens that they cannot list in the US because of the regulations there, they can list from their Malta platform. So we also have access to that as well. So again, the reason that we're bringing a lot of these coins to the market is because we believe that the market should decide. You know, we aren't the ones we're a platform. We let buyers and sellers come together. We let the forces of supply and demand come together. And through that, humanity will express its views about what has value and what doesn't. So that's why we're very excited. We definitely don't want to shill any particular coin above another. But I think it is also clear that there are certain coins that have better quality, so to speak, than others. And there's no disputing that.
Well, Jeet brought up specifically Constantinople debacle. Well, at first it was with Ethereum. Have you had to deal with that? What's the latest with Ethereum and Constantinople?
We've launched, so we've got all our infrastructure up and running, and we're doing internal testing at the moment. So we will be activating customer accounts. We have our registrations open, so we've got thousands of users that have already registered, but we'll only be activating them in the next few weeks, as mentioned. But because we have all our infrastructure in place, we need to pay attention to all of these things. And so it's a lot of work, you know, preparing for a particular fork that's going to be coming at the 11th hour. There's a change, there's a vulnerability that's discovered, and you're thinking about rolling back, but actually you shouldn't roll back. You should roll forward to the latest version of the software. So, I mean, and remember, Constantinople was meant to be like a very uneventful thing, right? So it just goes to show in this world how we need to be really, really careful. And it's actually quite daunting because there's so much to keep track of that one really needs to be on the ball all the time. So it's a 24-hour, 365 kind of game here, which is great for the world because we don't sleep, but it requires a lot of work to maintain it.
Jeet, oh yeah, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow. So one of the other things that's come up recently is that the 51% attacks on like the smaller proof of work coins. I'm curious, what's your take, and if you guys have had to put in any additional security procedures or anything to the extent that you can share on that.
Yeah, sure. So I can't share everything, but to the extent that I can share is what we will be trying to do as we launch with those first 50 coins, not the 200 coins, is basically getting coins that we think have kind of the most hashing power, so to speak, the most demand, etc. Now, having said that, I don't think anybody would have been expecting that ETC would have been one of the ones that is going to be 51% attacked, right? So I think what we need to do, and our strategy going forward, is we need to stay alert, right? I think exchanges are at the forefront of the danger zone where people can use exchanges to double spend, steal money, roll back the chain in their favor with a 51% attack, and then you're left out to dry. Effectively, the exchange is left out to dry. So we need to be like really, really on the ball. I think one of the beautiful things about the crypto world, as far as the protocol is concerned, is collaboration, right? Like we need to, anybody on that's running a Bitcoin node is collaborating with this network using certain rules that the network agrees on. And I think, like, as we move forward, I am anticipating that we will probably have more and more collaboration between certain players in the crypto industry, where once they kind of figure out what's going on and there's an alert, that they'll actually let their so-called competitors also know, because I don't think it's in anybody's interest for any exchange to get hacked. So like, we certainly don't want any of our so-called competitors to get hacked. That's not good for them. It's not good for the customer. It's not good for us. It's not good for the industry. So I think that we will be moving, and we're definitely very open to this, to working with players and players even in the local market in South Africa, players that people would consider to be our competitors, to say, listen, at the core layer, let us try to get as much security and confidence in the tokens of value that we are actually providing to our customers. And if we can do that, we can build confidence in this new industry, and build it up so that the pie is much bigger for everybody and that it has much more impact in the world. So Jeet, kind of a long thing to say is that, you know, given the partnership with Bittrex and kind of our own experts and team on the ground, we do everything we can to keep an eye on what's going on in the crypto sphere with all the coins that we actually provide. But as I've said again, because there are no guarantees, you need to be just really, really vigilant and do your absolute best. So that's what we're trying to do.
Hey, I will say this. I like the point you made that no one wants to see these exchanges get hacked.
Yeah.
I think it's always like a punch. It always scares people away. It always starts rumors that Bitcoin has been hacked. So
Yeah.
I wish they did not happen. And hopefully best practices will prevail and we can stop them or slow them down at least.
Yeah.
Jeet, you mentioned Constantinople. Tell us what is the latest? Did you know anything more about it? And how do you see the future of Ethereum after this?
So I don't know. I don't know the whole story on Constantinople. I think this is part of their like multi-stage transition of Ethereum from a proof of work consensus protocol to a proof of stake consensus protocol. A big part of this is they're reducing the block reward from 3 Ethereum to 2 Ethereum. So it's called the thirdening. I think that, you know, basically what happened is they're about to switch over. They've got people switching nodes over, and a security firm like discovered that there was a vulnerability. It didn't impact Ethereum at the moment. It didn't impact any of the dApps at the moment, but it was just like, you know, that's kind of something that was a little bit dangerous to upgrade when you know that there's a live vulnerability there. So they kind of paused it, and they asked people not to upgrade. Now, the interesting thing was before they said that, only like 20% or so of nodes had actually upgraded to Constantinople. So it's kind of interesting because, you know, in a proof of stake world, you need much more active participation from nodes. So like, you know, there was a Bitcoin vulnerability recently. You had a similar level of participation, but because, you know, like in general, Bitcoin is like a trust minimized system. I don't need to worry about updating my nodes. Like I don't need to be like super actively watching what's going on. It's a little bit more safer. There needs to be a change in behavior from the Ethereum guys to be able to point out that you know what, there needs to be active participation from the nodes. Like there needs to be an active community that's voting on things. A lot of their game theory for proof of stake requires active participation. So it's kind of disturbing that only 20% participated, but I think that's going to improve over time. I think the only other notes I had on it was that Vitalik made a good point on Twitter afterwards. He said that you've got N security, you know, if you got N features, there's N squared ways to actually break the protocol, which is true. You know, one of the things that we always talk about is like Bitcoin's super simple. It's not going to break. It's here forever. And that's kind of overgeneralizing, but the idea is that changes are made pretty slowly and they're very well vetted. If you have like so many different attack vectors, at some point, somebody's going to figure out a unique way to take advantage of it. So that's the whole risk for Ethereum in general, that they're trying to innovate in too many areas at once. And it just means that things can't move forward because it's not a company, it's a protocol. So
he admitted that N squared theory there. That's interesting. I mean,
yeah, that's been the core Bitcoin, you know, maximalist criticism of Ethereum for a long time, you know, in terms of the vulnerabilities and stuff. But yeah, it's good. I guess, I mean, he's learning now. Like, you know, some of the things that people have been saying. So,
hey, what happened to Farzam? He dropped. Oh man, I want him to mention. He's going to be. He might come back. But Jeet, we've obviously reached the end of the show. Do you have any conclusionary remarks? I thank you much for being on today and waking up so early at your undisclosed location. Anything we left off that you wanted to talk about or bring up?
Yeah, you know what? I think. So look, I'm more bullish than ever. Yeah, you know what? I think that's one thing to touch about. Like we're in the heart of the bear market right now. I saw this recent news article about Sam Zell. You know, so Sam Zell's he's famous in the Midwest, at least. He's like a billionaire, and he made his money. He went to University of Michigan, started buying apartments, as a college student, and he's a multi-billionaire now, and he owns a couple different publicly traded companies. And it was kind of funny, and I tweeted about it recently. It's like he said he's buying gold now because the supply of gold is going to be constrained going forward. Nobody's investing in new gold mines, and all the gold mines are buying each other. And I thought it was kind of interesting because the way that he's made his money in the past is he bought distressed real estate back in like the 70s or 80s. So they call him the grave dancer. And at the same time, more recently in the 2000s, he shifted from buying apartments in suburbia, shifted the entire portfolio over to buying apartments in like 24/7 cities, like, you know, downtown Chicago, New York, places like that, because he realized that millennials prefer those 24/7 cities to apartments in suburbia. And it's like, well, okay, so what's distressed right now, and what do millennials prefer? Talking about Bitcoin, baby. So it was just such an obvious it was just such an obvious point. And I think that's like nothing's fundamentally changed. The price has changed a little bit, and the price is a little bit distressed. But I think that people should just keep the long term in mind, and, you know, make sure it's a reasonable part of your investment allocation. You're not 100% in Bitcoin, keeping cash on the side, investing in other things, and everything else. But I think as like a long term investment, it's just really exciting that, like, it hasn't, you know, how many years in are we? It's just not going anywhere. So I think as these governments continue to betray the trust of their citizens, and, you know, the central banks continue to be unable to make, you know, further changes, and I think they're just showing the complete inability to actually make the changes that are required in order to transition their economies away from being dependent on, you know, the next Fed announcement. Alternatives like gold and Bitcoin are just going to become more and more important.
Well, I'll say this about Sam Zell. He obviously, sometimes he's thinking about what the millennials are thinking. So I hope but obviously with his gold, millennials aren't buying gold. I will say that.
Yeah.
And Sam, he's not always right. I guess another old fashioned type of thing he invested in, where he invested in the newspapers, into the Tribune, correct?
That's right. And that was his famous disaster.
It was a huge failure. It was, it was a disaster with the Baltimore Sun. That's why I know about it, because I'm from Baltimore. But yeah, so he's not always right. So be careful. He's buying gold that, but with the point you brought up about the apartments, though, like, yeah, what is distressed? What's the future? Millennials are the future. Distressed and millennials. There's Bitcoin right there. That's a great way of looking at it. Maybe he'll wake up and think about it too. I don't know if he's made any comments on Bitcoin in the past. I have no idea. When I hear his name, I think about Baltimore Sun, and I think about complete failure. So, all right, Farzan, we're talking about conclusionary remarks here. I thank you so much for being on today. And I at the beginning of the show, I said, or before the show, you got to talk about the upcoming events in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and in Cape Town that you're hosting and are a part of.
Sure. So at the end of February, there's going to be the Blockchain Africa Conference that's taking place both in Johannesburg and Cape Town. Right at the end of February and beginning of March is the one in Johannesburg. On the 6th of March is the one in Cape Town. So I think this is the 5th year that is running. You were there, Adam, last year. That's where we saw each other, met each other in person for the first time.
Yeah, and I was also there the first year. I was there the first year in Cape Town.
Yeah. So I think the organizers have done a stellar job. They really do their best to get really good speakers, good topics. I'm very, very excited. I'll be the MC for the Johannesburg one, and then a participant in the Cape Town one. So if anybody's in the area, or even not in the area but wants to come through, please do come through. I think we're probably expecting close to 1,000 people, participants, if I'm not mistaken. So let's see. It should be good. And then as far as concluding remarks, I think I always like to kind of, if I ever have a platform to try to influence people's thoughts, is that the most power, the most power that we can have is from unity. So whenever we're fighting each other, whenever we're insulting each other, whenever we're kind of gloating and trying to put others down, I really feel like nobody wins. So I think, and I'm not just talking about that within the crypto community, I'm talking about that from within the crypto community to the non-crypto community, etc. So I feel like if people are interested in being right, and that's their goal, by all means. If you're interested in progress, the most progress comes about through unity and taking people along with you, and that's what we're trying to do. And we're gonna have challenges along the way, obviously, but I'm hopeful.
A great way to end it. Pound that like button, people. I love those positive notes. Again, I thank these two guys for being on. I also thank Gabriel, who was having all sorts of technical difficulties, but he got in the very important information that things are pretty wild down there. And we've both communicated during the show, and he is going to come back onto a show before the 23rd, before the day of the riots down there, to talk about what's going on. Maybe we'll have some other Venezuelan guests on also. So coming this week, I'm going to have a Venezuela show with Gabriel shall return. I know a lot of people love to hear him talk. His energy level is always very exciting. And today he gave us some very interesting information about what's going on down there. So everybody in Venezuela, I hope you've got a strong hand. Be safe with your Bitcoin and everything. Be careful out there too. Seems like we're going to hit a big day on January 23rd. Also in the super chat, Jal said all the and he sent me $1.99. So thank you. He says all the parabolic $100,000 charts make anyone leery. Well, you know, Jay, I try not to get too excited. I see those charts also that say, oh, it's going to be $100,000. You know, I know that in terms of fiat, at some point it will be worth more and everyone will be very pleased. Again, for me, it's one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. So I don't try to get too excited over a lot of people, like they bank their whole lives on that. They're like, oh, a chart said it's going to be worth $200,000 on the February 2nd, 2022. And you know, yeah, don't get too excited. It doesn't make me leery. It just makes me want to just take it one day at a time, enjoy one day at a time, and don't go too wild about fiat. Just value your wealth in Bitcoin. That's what those charts make me think. So anyway, thank you guys again for being on. This show comes on every Friday. Who knows at what time? It depends on a lot of things. Bang the bell button, pound that like button. TechBalt on Twitter. These guys are listed below on Twitter and their related sites also. So do check them out. Everybody, Shabbat Shalom. I will see you later. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers.